Hello, welcome to Brand Storytelling. I'm Angela Matusik, and I am here today to talk about a really incredible film called A Voice for the Wild that was made by Credo Films and a Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. So I have two fantastic guests with me today to dive into this beautiful film. Jesse, I'll have you start. Can you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. This is Jesse Roesler. I'm the founder and creative director at Credo Nonfiction and directed this film.
And I am Pete Marshall. I'm the communications director with Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, a nonprofit that has been working to protect this treasure of a wilderness in northeastern Minnesota for almost 50 years now.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully those of you listening have had a chance to watch this film, and if not, as soon as you finish hearing the creators talk about it, you'll rush to go view it. I think it's sort of almost a tale of two films. And so to really understand how A Voice of the Wild came to be, we have to talk about another film that Jesse made with the star Emily, which was called Breaking Trail. And that was made in the middle of the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was just such a beautiful film. I challenge anybody to watch it without tearing up, and it hits so many like relevant points in our lives and society. It's just remarkable, and I can understand why you wanted to continue working with Emily, so I'm super excited to hear about that. So can you just talk a little bit about how did you first discover Emily and get connected with her as a filmmaker and tell her story?
Absolutely. And thank you for that intro to Breaking Trail. Yeah, these are really companion films. You don't need to have seen Breaking Trail to enjoy A Voice for the Wild, but if you have, it'll probably make it more meaningful. Yeah, with Breaking Trail. So I live in Western Wisconsin, not far from a trail called the Ice Age Trail. Not a lot of people outside of this region maybe haven't heard of that trail, but it's beautiful. It sort of winds all the way through the state, 1,200 miles. A lot of people have through hiked that trail, meaning beginning to end in the summertime. Only one person in history had actually attempted that in winter because it gets very cold here in the winter. But Emily Ford, like you said, it was December 2020. She decided, she's a historical gardener, so she typically has winters off anyway. She's like, okay, this winter, I want to do something different and special. And so she's like, I'm going to through hike this thing in winter. And she decided she would take a sled dog with her. So she actually borrowed a sled dog, an Alaskan Husky, and they set off on this adventure together to hike these 1,200 miles. And I saw about this because I'm a supporter of the trail, the Ice Age Trail. I'm a member of the Alliance. And so we get a newsletter and they always publish blurbs about people through hiking, especially something as notable as this time of year. And I started reaching out to Emily via Instagram, and it took us a few weeks to finally connect. She's in and out of service. And I said, I think what you're doing is really special and incredible. And it was a good time for us to take on a passion project like this. And so after a bit of back and forth, and Emily was at first unsure, but we met up and really hit it off. And so over the course of her 60 some day hike, we would meet up and I would hike a section of trail with her. And these amazing things started to happen. Communities just rallied around making sure she was safe and getting the food and everything she needed. And I don't want to have too many spoilers here, but ultimately that led to a great relationship. And that was Breaking Trail. And then this new project came about pretty quickly after that film came out.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to make sure everybody heard what you said, which was that you got the idea for the film through a newsletter, which I just think is fantastic and speaks to all of us who send out newsletters to people in hopes that they read them. And you never know what you're going to find, right? So that's awesome. So both of these films involve you documenting a trip through the wilderness in really very extreme conditions, extreme winter conditions, lots of loneliness and solitude. So the first film, as you mentioned, on the Ice Age Trail, there are parts where Emily goes through towns and through roads and meets other people. But one of the most striking things when you watch A Voice for the Wild is just how lonely it seems. And you're just like, oh my God, this person is out there plunging through feet and feet of snow and freezing temperatures. So first, just on a professional note, like, why would you want to go do this? It's so cold and looks so miserable. And secondly, how were you able to preserve the sense of isolation and still capture the journey?
Excuse me.
You're like, I still don't want to go.
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
I still have a cold from being out there though. No, yeah, well, the nice thing is Breaking Trail like set me up to understand how to do that in cold weather really well. So that was great. I learned a lot from Emily, and she's such a pro at it. And it really informs the story. I mean, it adds layers to what she was doing. And it was really just following her on her next adventure. And I think the isolation part of it, I wanted to, I work with, typically documentary crews were a little bit smaller than like narrative or commercial crews, which is great. I love that we can have a smaller footprint. And typically when we're working with real people, we want to keep it small so the mechanics of filmmaking doesn't get in the way of them doing authentically what they do and letting them be who they are. And so in this case, it's just myself coming out there with Emily. And so she could just be as she was and do her thing. And I could observe and maybe ask a question here or there. But it really, I hope, lets you get into her mindset and experience her true point of view, because she has such a fascinating perspective and she's such a fun person to watch and be with. So, just by having that small footprint, hopefully we'll let her come through.
It definitely works. And Peter, can you tell me, how did you discover the film Breaking Trail first before you came up with the idea of creating a film about the Boundary Waters?
No, I, like so many other people, read about Emily after she completed the Ice Age Trail. She definitely got national attention, and rightfully so, for this trip. So, I kind of coyly reached out to her on Instagram, like Jesse.
Oh my God, Instagram is like in it for the win on this project.
I hope Meta's paying us for this, but reached out to her, and so like, no. If you're ever thinking of doing something in the Boundary Waters, let us know. We'd love to partner and sponsor and support you in any way. Because, as communications director, I'm always looking for the next great story to kind of highlight the Boundary Waters and bring awareness to it. And, everything Emily was doing about diversity in the wilderness, that the wilderness is for everyone, and just aligned with where we wanted to go as an organization. So that kind of initiated some conversations, and I think I was having coffee with her in Duluth one day, and I had seen a few posts that was like, "Oh, is she making a film out of her Ice Age adventure?" So then she told me about it, and I said, "Well, yeah, we would also want to make a film out of the Boundary Waters expedition." And a testament to Jesse's work, she said, "That's okay, but I get to pick the documentarian crew. I don't want just anyone to show up there." And contact Jesse at Jesse Roesler at Credo Nonfiction. So then I contacted Jesse, and that's how that came about.
It's wonderful. So it sounds like, I'm just curious, like maybe like which came first? It was the idea of like working with Emily, or did you have a film in mind? Like, is film something that you do regularly in your marketing?
I always want to do more film. And we have done a number of projects, such as a series of how-to videos that show people how to cook food in camp, portage a canoe, paddle a canoe, what to expect in the Boundary Waters. So we did that project 2 summers ago, and then did another short documentary about Bob and Pat Tamman, who are some really dedicated advocates for clean water. And that story is interesting because Bob opposes these toxic mines that have been proposed, and he's also a former miner. So that's an interesting dynamic there. So film something we always want to do more of. It's a great way to reach people, and I think just the format requires people to kind of sit with the story a little longer than a lot of the social media we digest. So everything kind of worked out out.
So so were you guys in touch like while you were filming the project? I mean, I'm just curious, like you must almost feel like guardian angels in a way, because you're sort of like paying so much attention to where Emily is and wondering how she's doing. Did you ever have any scary moments or have interesting conversations between the two of you in between filming to sort of keep track of what's going on?
I think, kind of like from the base level, I kind of worked out okay, what are the areas that Jesse can film her at? Because it is a federally protected wilderness. So,
Mhm.
well, technically you can film in there. You really can't.
You won't tell anybody.
They are very strict on what they
Yeah.
let go on in there for
Mhm.
various reasons. So kind of worked out some details on where he could go and film her, but mostly, it was Jesse who was in contact with her and did the meetup, so he can probably speak more to that.
Yeah, it was great to have, the bones of a plan in place. And then of course the timing can change drastically. For Emily, she might have a day where the wind is at her back and she just cruises. And then the next day it's at her front and it's 30 miles an hour. And she's like, I only made it, 3 miles. I made it 10 miles yesterday. So it's just being flexible. And that was one of the challenges, is like just like, okay, we need to be at this point this day, clear all this other stuff. Let's make sure we can get there. And then things would happen, of course, that are unexpected. And like, we're trying to capture a lot of that, but some of it, just because I'm not there for the entire trip, these things happen. And one thing was that she actually fell through some thin ice, where water is moving. You can't always tell exactly where that
Your
ice
biggest nightmare.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, thankfully she's had experience, and we've done this, us hardy Northerners, both films were in Banff. And so there's a tradition there as well. We got in a mountain stream and like, we do Wim Hof breathing. So it's like, thankfully she had that training and like that mindset of like, okay, I'm in the water. I don't need to panic. I need to remember my breathing. And she like got herself out and dried off her stuff. And like, you could see this video of her like with a fire and like all of her clothes hanging up and like drying, and like she made it through. And it's like, she's in a place where, like you said, it's one of the most isolated places in the country, which is what makes it so peaceful and beautiful, but there is nobody else there. So, I was keeping in touch with her on that stuff, and then just making sure we know where to meet and when, and all that. And luckily we had some misses on the Ice Age trail, ironically, but we did pretty good here. There were some big hikes in, but we always found each other.
Yeah, I guess it's a reason why you would probably want to travel light too, because you're like literally carrying everything yourself into the wilderness through snow.
Camp and gear, like film
Wow.
gear, and like I slept in a hammock tent that I could just pop between two trees. It's really small and compact, and the 0-degree bag, the whole thing. But yeah, it was one of it's the most physically demanding project I've done. I'll just say that. Yeah.
And just to kind of like geek out a little bit, can you talk about like the technical aspect of shooting in such cold weather? I know, you talked about having a small footprint, and that helps create, that you're not aware of your presence. So there is this one moment where she does refer to you as her guest in her living room or whatever, which I think is quite sweet. But yeah, like what do you do? Like, how do you make sure your batteries don't die?
Exactly. That was the big trick. I mean, that's what I learned after the first couple of times, because the cameras did die. I mean, there's a whole scene in Breaking Trail that was shot on my iPhone 12. And I hate saying that as a gearhead.
Yeah.
But yeah, so ultimately what I deciphered is like, there's these great heat packs that are made, and recently they've done with an adhesive side, so it's meant to just like stick it to your chest or wherever. But I started sticking these all over the batteries, and that is what saved us. Like the cameras would stay on because the batteries were warm in these heat packs. I'm shocked that the drone didn't fall out of the sky, honestly, when we were flying it at -20, but props to DJI. So like it all worked out. But yeah, it was, it's a handheld camera, a couple of cinema lenses, and a drone, just all in a backpack, but it starts to weigh a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. It's so beautiful. And I also want to just talk a little about Emily. And I know she was unable to join us today because she's, I think, on a long road trip. Is that right?
Yep. She's just crossed into Alaska. She's heading up there to learn a bit more about sled dog racing, and a friend of hers is actually doing the Iditarod, so she's just helping her train.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned dogs, because I feel like we can't really talk about this film without talking about the other character, Diggins. So I think for as I watched both films consecutively, so much of it is about this relationship between Emily and the dog. That I'm just curious, like, what is it? Is it a common thing to do to go on these epic walks with a dog by your side, or is that something that you think Emily was sort of doing in a unique spirit?
I think there's definitely a precedent for it. And I think, the biggest reason for her is companionship. I mean, you get so isolated, especially in the Boundary Waters, having, even if it's not a human, like a being there that you can, and she connects with her in a really profound way, as you see in both films. That companionship is huge. And then, it's also protection for her too. Thankfully she didn't need that. But when we talked about why she wanted to do that initially, those were the reasons. But I think it definitely adds an entirely different lens and layer to an adventure like that.
And did Diggins welcome you to the campsite?
I wish I could say she did. Yeah, no, the first time we met, I lost a glove, and I was handing a lavalier microphone, and was like, oh no, you don't hand anything to her. That is my person. So Diggins was very protectful of Emily. And sadly, it wasn't until like after a while when we were meeting up, I had a warm vehicle, usually a mile or two away, and I would bring Emily a hot cocoa and a gas station sandwich, which was like her favorite, refueling thing. And so Diggins got to jump in the back and get warm. So eventually she was like, okay, you're the guy with the warm vehicle. Right. I can get close.
You were gonna say you brought like a hot dog or something for that would be nice too. And I'm curious, Peter, when you were going on this adventure, I know you said you discovered Emily through some of the publicity that she had gotten from her first adventure, but she's got such a unique spirit and point of view. And, the first film touches upon so many things, racial diversity when it comes to outdoor adventuring, talks about, accepting and having an open mind for your neighbors and community members, like not to presume the worst of people, which I think we really do so much these days. And just this idea of being your true self. But then this next film, A Voice of the Wild, sort of layers in other topics. Like, can you just talk as a communications expert, like what is it about Emily that makes her so magical when it comes to just creating empathy and connection with her audience?
Yeah. So in this film, Emily does talk about, and other talking heads in it speak to one of the major environmental controversies we've had in Minnesota for the last, more than a decade now, and that's these proposed copper sulfide mines that have been proposed right on the edge of the Boundary Waters. And this is a highly toxic, highly polluting industry that in a water-rich area like the Boundary Waters, would almost certainly pollute some of the most pristine water in the country. So, as a nonprofit, we're really good at marshaling the facts, getting the data, getting the science, writing up big legal briefs. That might not be the most exciting way to reach a broader audience, though. So that's why we're always looking for, that human connection, because we really do believe that the way to protect the Boundary Waters, or really any natural area, is for people to go there, experience it, and to fall in love with that place, right? You're not going to win people's hearts by giving them a bunch of facts and figures. Some people you might, but mostly you want that emotional connection. Emily, she is just an incredible spokesperson for this wild space. You could see it in the film just from the expression of just pure, simple joy of being out there, to, I think, much more thoughtful reflections on what it means to be alone in such an isolated area. And that just provides a big kind of emotional spectrum that people can connect with. And because, part of her message is that the outdoors is for everyone, that this is a place for people of color as well. She's also an inspiration for people who may not have ever seen themselves in the outdoors to go and try it for themselves at whatever capacity that is, not necessarily a 30-day winter expedition. But we couldn't, myself, I was, when I watched the first cut and just heard Emily speak, and it's unscripted. It wasn't like I
Yeah.
said, all right, say this, say that, and that. I just like jumped out of my seat out of excitement, because as the communications director, I was like, yes,
Yeah.
this is amazing. This is perfect. I'm just giddy.
Fun. I bet I can totally
Yeah.
imagine. That's fantastic. And Jesse, did you have any emotional or personal connection to this, to the Boundary Waters before you started this project?
I did. Yeah, I was so excited to hear from Emily and then Pete, like this is where she was going. I was fortunate enough to grow up. My dad would bring me to the Boundary Waters fishing from like, when I was 9 years old or 10 years old. So like this is a place that holds a very special place in my heart too. So it's like, oh, one of my favorite people is going to one of my favorite places,
Right.
and I get to do one of my favorite things. Let's do it. I'm in.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of magic coming together. I love that story. And I'm wondering what you're going to be doing next. Like this film has been finished. Has it been released yet to an audience? Can you talk, Peter, too, a little bit about how you're going to get people's attention and make sure that you're discovering and inspiring other people to sort of follow along on the journey?
Yeah, so we've did several blog posts and newsletter articles when Emily was out on trail, and then have kept our members and supporters up to date with where the film's at. But for the film itself, it's making its rounds through the festivals, and then and Jesse and Credo's helping us with this. Ideally, then we'll find a distributor with a wider platform, and that will help to get it in front of thousands of people across the country who probably enjoy nature, like the outdoors, but maybe don't know about the Boundary Waters or the issues facing the Boundary Waters.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that and say, we had a really beautiful life for Breaking Trail. And so a lot of the people that programmed and distributed and like love that film, like are so ready for another adventure with Emily. So we're able to premiere at Banff Mountain Film again this year, which is like the perfect audience for, the outdoor adventure film mecca, and that'll be available on their platform as well very soon. And then we're a number of other festivals are in the near future, but there'll be other places to stream it as well.
I'm sure your audience in Park City is just going to eat it up too, so that'll
be
great.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
And you said everybody who saw the first film is like would be excited and eager to watch the second film because Emily is so charming and wonderful to follow with. So that just begs the question, like, what's next? I mean, I feel like we need more of Emily and Diggins. Is that something that's on your mind or on her mind?
Oh yeah, definitely. She definitely has, aspirations to get to the polls. She's friends with Anne Bancroft. Anne Bancroft loaned us some of her gear for this Boundary Waters expedition. You'll see her in the thanks. Anne Bancroft was the first woman to make it to the North Pole, and they've become close. It's funny, Anne was at the screening we did at Breaking Trail in Renon St. Croix, where Anne lives. And so they hit it off and have been, plotting and scheming since then. And she's also got a very ambitious hike in her future that will be a multi-year hike as well. So there'll definitely be more adventures to capture on film. So
a multi-year hike and a multi-year documentary project.
Yeah, well, as a documentarian, I know that's not so strange. I think my first picture took 6 or 7 years, so it's okay. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's so exhilarating to watch the film. It's really inspiring. Makes me feel a little bit like a wimp because I've never done anything remotely close to this. But maybe I will. Maybe we'll go for a wintry hike when we see each other in Park City soon. That would be fantastic.
Oh, let's do it. What a beautiful place to be out there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. And please, if you haven't watched it yet, stop what you're doing and go watch A Voice for the Wild.